Hello, Lovelace. Welcome to today's science lesson. Starting a new topic for this half term, and we are looking at sound, noise, music, all those things that we hear. Okay? And over the course of the half term, we'll answer questions like, what is it? How's it made? How do we hear it? Can we stop it? How can we change it? And can we measure it? Okay, so all those questions will be answered over the next few weeks. But for today, our focus is going to be, can I explain how sounds are made and how we hear them? Okay, so the very basic, how we make a sound, how anything makes a sound. And then how do we actually hear it? So we're going to be looking at the human ear, and we're going to be looking at how sounds are made. Okay. Now, first of all, a little experiment for you. I'd like you to place your hand on your throat, similar to the diagram. Then I'd like you to make a humming noise. Can you feel what's happening? What you're feeling there is your basically your voice box, okay? And it's vibrating. Now, a vibration is a quick, recurring movement. Okay, so hopefully you're hearing vibration. If you're not, just try moving your fingers around a little bit or making the noise a little bit louder. But you should be able to feel a vibration anytime you make a noise. And there's your vocal cords in your throat are vibrating. Okay? They are helping make the sound. And that's true of everything. In fact, anything that makes a sound is vibrating. So anything that makes a sound is actually moving. Sometimes so slightly we can't see it, but there is a rapid repeating movement, a vibration. So sometimes it's a really big vibration that you can feel and even see. If you've ever tried twanging your ruler on the edge of a desk, it does make a noise, but it's also visible. You can see the vibration as that ruler twangs up and down. But equally, sometimes vibrations can be so tiny that we can't feel them, we can't see them. But we know they're there because there is a sound that's created and we can hear it. So, how does the sound actually reach our ears? If something is vibrating, something is making a sound, how does that sound get to us? Well, sound needs something to travel through. We call that a medium. Now, normally, that's the air, okay? But sound can also travel through liquids and solids. If you've ever tried making a noise underwater, maybe you've been in a swimming pool, you can actually make a sound underwater and the sound will travel through that water. You can shout through a wall, you can shout through a door. So sound will travel through solids. But generally, in everyday life, sounds generally are traveling through the air. Now, if you're in a vacuum, if you're in a place where there is no air, there is no liquid, no solid. So if you're in space, for example, where there's no gas there at all, then sound will not travel. So you can shout as loud as you like in space, and that sound will not reach any distance whatsoever because it does need something to travel through. As I say, usually it's air, but any gas, any liquid, any solid, and sound will travel. Now, the object that makes the sound vibrates, okay? And that vibration causes a vibration in the medium, in the particles of the medium, in the air particles or the water particles or whatever it is. So the force of the force of the vibration makes the particles in that medium vibrate as well. So they start to knock into each other. And what's happening is that they form a sound wave, which travels in all directions. So from that center point where the sound is made, they'll travel in all directions, up, down, left, right, forwards, back, every single direction. Okay? And if the sound wave is strong enough, then it will reach your ears. So just because something is making a sound doesn't mean it will necessarily reach you. It's got to be strong enough to cover that distance. So someone shouting in Australia you're not going to hear them because that sound wave is not strong enough. Now, a nice way to think about it is a still pond. If you drop a pebble into a pond, you see the ripples coming out in all directions. Now, obviously, a ripple in a pond, it's a flat surface. So they're traveling on a two-dimensional, just sort of, but sound will travel up and down as well, not just side to side. But it's still a nice way to think about it. So the sound is made in the very center there, where the pebble is dropped, and the waves travel out in all directions until they reach something to listen to them. Okay? But the further away they go, the weaker they get. And eventually that sound wave will just die away. And there'll be no sound left. So close to the object making the sound, you'll hear it clearly. The further away you are, the weaker that wave gets, and the weaker the sound gets, the quieter the sound gets. Okay? So, for example, someone's hitting a drum. The skin on that drum will vibrate. So every time it's being hit, the skin of that drum is vibrating. Now, in turn, the air particles around the drum will start to vibrate as well, and they will start to create that sound wave. And that sound wave will travel away from the drum, getting gradually weaker, so getting gradually quieter. But as long as there is sufficient strength in that sound wave when it reaches you, and as it spreads away from the drum, then it will reach your ear. And finally, your ear picks up the sound wave, and your brain translates that wave into a sound, actually identifies, and your brain is able to say, that is a drum. Okay? But it's just based on these waves traveling through the particles of the air. If there was no air between you and the drum, if there was nothing at all, so if there was just a vacuum, you wouldn't hear it. But the sound waves are able to travel through the air by creating this sound wave. So the sound has reached your ear. How do you make sense of it? What we're going to do now is we're going to look at how the human ear is constructed, all the bits and what they do. And your task at the end of this is going to be basically to create this diagram. So pay attention to the different bits so that you're able to create your own label diagram at the end of this session. Okay, so a bit of a heads up, a bit of a warning as to what the task will be, so you can focus on where these parts are and what they do. Okay, so let's start. Here's a diagram of the human ear. Now it is a diagram, not a photograph. So this is an artist's impression. So we're going to look at the different parts and see what their job is and where they're located and how we actually hear sound. So first of all, we've got the pinna. Now the pinna is that bit of skin on the outside of your head that we call the ear. So it's the visible part. Okay, so it's the bit that we see, the bit we hang our glasses off. Now it's shaped in the way it is because it collects sound. It's actually shaped like a funnel, and it steers the sound waves towards the hole in the middle. So that's why it looks the way it does. It actually has been developed over thousands and thousands and thousands of years to steer the shape, a shape to steer the sound waves towards the hole in the middle, towards the ear itself. Okay, so that's the pinna. Next, we've got the auditory canal or the ear canal. Okay. So this is the tube. This is the bit that links the outer ear, the pinna, to all the bits inside. So sound waves travel along this tube. And I've said tube in the loosest sense, but it's a sort of a tubular shape to allow the sound waves to travel from the pinna, from the outside, into the ear. Okay. So the pinna and the auditory canal, so the two things we've looked at so far, these form the outer ear. Okay. Now, the ear canal itself, we need to look after it. And that means we don't shove things into it. I was once warned not to put anything into the ear canal, even cotton buds, because we can do damage. We can, if we use cotton buds to sort of clean out wax and things, it's very easy to actually push the wax further down and block up our ear, or even worse, the earbud actually punctures or damages this part of our ear, which we're going to look at now. Okay, so be very careful what you put in your ear. Someone once said to me, the smallest thing you should put into your ear is your own elbow. And if you think about it, that's impossible. So the advice was basically don't put anything into your ear. So anyway, that's the outer ear, the pinna, and the auditory canal. We then move on to this part of our ear, and that's called the eardrum. Now, the eardrum is a thin piece of tissue that's sort of stretched just like a drum skin, hence its name. Okay, so we've got an ovalish shaped piece of tissue stretched really tightly. And you can imagine if that was ripped or torn by someone sticking an earbud in, it would be incredibly painful and would also damage your hearing. Be careful. Now, sound waves travel through the pinna, along the auditory canal, until they hit the eardrum. And they cause the eardrum to vibrate. Okay, so the sound waves have traveled all this way, and they cause the eardrum to vibrate. So what comes next? What comes next is the middle ear. So we're into this part of the ear now, and this is called the middle ear, and it contains the three smallest bones in the human body. Those three bones are the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup. Hammer comes first after the eardrum, then the anvil, and then the stirrup. Okay, so three tiny, tiny bones that sort of rest against each other. And what happens is as the sound wave comes through, causes the eardrum to vibrate, it actually pushes into these three bones. So it knocks into the hammer, which knocks into the anvil, which knocks into the stirrup. Okay, so that sound wave, that vibration continues through the middle ear. Okay, so a reminder, so far, we've gone pinna, auditory canal, eardrum, hammer, anvil, stirrup. Okay. Now, the hammer, anvil, and stirrup are also referred to by three different names. It depends what textbook you're looking at, depends who you're talking to. Okay, so the hammer is also known as the malleus, the anvil is the incus, and the stirrup, the stapes. Same things, just, let's say, an alternate group of names for the same bones. Right, so we've traveled from the outer ear through into the middle ear. We're now going to get into the inner ear. And what we've got here is the semicircular canals. Now, strangely, although this is part of the ear, it's got very little to do with hearing. The semicircular canal contains a fluid, and that fluid moves around and helps us know which way up we are. It's all to do with our balance. Okay, so it helps us with our balance, but it also has a downside. It's also what causes travel sickness. So what happens, there is a fluid, there is a liquid in there, and the more it moves around, the more unsteady we are, the more we feel off balance. And so if you're on a boat and it's rocking to and fro, then the fluid inside your semicircular canals is also rocking around, and that can cause you to feel unwell. Now, people like ballet dancers have learned tricks to overcome it. So they can spin around without feeling unwell. And they do what we call spotting. They fix their eye on a thing in the distance and spin their head really, really quickly back to that spot. And it fools the semicircular canal into thinking you've not moved at all because they flick the head so quickly. But it's, as I say, got nothing to do with hearing at all, but everything to do with balance. So we've got to be really, say, it's something that's part of our ear, but not to do with hearing. So let's move on to the hearing. Next, we've got the cochlea. Now, the cochlea looks a bit like a snail shell, but inside this thing that looks like a snail shell is about 15,000 tiny hairs. And what's going to happen is the sound wave, which remember has traveled into the pinna, along the auditory canal. It's caused the eardrum to vibrate. Hit the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup. That message, that signal, has then been passed into the cochlea. So that sound wave is now working its way along the cochlea, hitting these little hairs and causing these little hairs to move. So the hairs move when they're hit by the sound wave, and they send messages along the auditory nerve. Okay, and the auditory nerve is this piece of flesh, is this bit here, which is actually connected to the brain. Okay, so the auditory nerve, information from the cochlea is sent along the auditory nerve to the brain. Now the brain then translates these messages into sounds. And it's incredible. Our brain is an incredible piece of kit because from a sound wave entering the ear, it takes less than 0.05 of a second. Okay, so think about that. 0.05 of a second. 0.5 of a second will be half a second, which is pretty quick. This is 0.05 of a second. Within that time, it can make sense of that sound and tell you what you're listening to. So we start with the outer ear, the pinna, the auditory canal. That's our outer ear. We get to the eardrum. The eardrum vibrated, and then we're into the middle ear of the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup, before getting into the inner ear of the semicircular canals, the cochlea, and the auditory nerve. 9 elements there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now we get onto your task, because what I'd like you to do, please, is to draw me a diagram of the human ear. Now you can use this one as a reference if you like. You can go online and find your own. You can go back to the video and use some of the ones, use the one I used. I really don't mind as long as all the elements are there. So I'd like you to draw a diagram, and then I'd like you to label all the parts we've discussed. There are 9 to include. So your diagram, as well as being clear and well drawn, in pencil please, should include 9 clear labels. Okay. For now, that's the end of today's session. Hope that's all made sense. We'll move on with sound next time. But as usual, look after yourselves, look after those around you. Take care, and I will see you all soon.